Hi everyone, welcome to the Fucked Up Therapist episode number 3 of the podcast. You can find me on YouTube and also on Spotify or the various other platforms. Today, let me tell you a little bit about my story. I've spoken in episode 1 of some of the paths of becoming the Fucked Up Therapist, but an important part of who I am today comes from my past, from what I've gone through, and a few situations in my life. So I'll be talking a little bit more about the hardships, some of the situations which unexpectedly maybe had an effect on my way of seeing the world or on my life in general, and this hopefully will give you a piece of insight also maybe onto how you can go through life or overcome or feel that too you are not alone. As I said in episode 1, basically I felt like I had a very normal, common upbringing, and a few weeks have gone since that episode and I was realizing that actually that was somehow some kind of a lie. That wasn't completely true. Some aspects of my life define me, others don't, and most of them basically depend on how I'm going to react or interact with them at my age now, whether whatever happened when I was young or not. So let's start with a few things. When I was young, I used to live in Switzerland and go for the summer in the UK and to see some friends, family, my grandparents. Regularly going there, I met a few friends and I was very closely and very soon exposed to death. First of all, first time I got myself exposed to death, I was 2 years old. I don't recall that, but I was told I fell in a swimming pool and I was at the bottom and people had to come and collect me, and I survived that. So that was an interesting thing. That was one of my first encounters with death. Then a few years later, a friend of mine in the UK dies from leukemia. I was still a kid. I think I must have been 7 or 8 years old. So that had an impact, some kind of sadness of death has basically a toll on us. We never know when that can happen. Super young, super old, been going through that. And I'm a single child, so having to figure myself out with parents working, going on holiday, doing things, being with my grandparents, or having to figure myself out. Friends, I used to be in a private school, so that means that friends didn't live around me. I had my neighbor as a friend, but he was in the public school, so we went together all the time. I'd see him afternoon, evenings, as he was the neighbor, but the connection was different. And then slowly came to the age of 10, 11, and my parents, for basically their best decision at the time, decided that it would be good for my education to go into a boarding school. So I'm sent at age 11 to a boarding school 2 hours away roughly from home. I could come back on the Wednesdays and over the weekends, so it was a weekly board. The good thing about that school, basically, private tuition, whatever. The pitfall about that school, it was a school where people had a certain amount of money and we were basically coming in there with not the same kind of amount. So I felt like I wasn't in the same world. At the same time, for me as a child, for 10 years old, 11, I felt like a massive rejection, that my parents were basically just throwing me out there because they didn't want to see me or they didn't want to spend that time with me. So that was really a massive feeling of rejection. Yet again, not blaming them, because I'm sure that they did that for the highest good and they really felt that that was going to be the best thing for me to have a bright future. So I can be very grateful for them for that, at the same time as my inner feeling of rejection and how difficult that was for me. What actually happened in this school was that there was a lot of bullying. From day one, I was bullied by 2 or 3 people, beaten up every evening, almost, sometimes in the morning, taken aside to be just hit and bashed onto. And I was part of the lucky ones because some of my friends actually got sexually harassed or sexually assaulted by some of these same students and also by some of the teachers. Then came the time when, still in their school, I got hit and I took a punch in the face by one of the teachers who was also a priest. And that was some kind of a surprising thing for me. So I had to go through that feeling of rejection from my parents and that feeling of adults aren't safe. They're dangerous. And people of my age aren't safe either. Those who have a certain amount of money or are different to me aren't safe. They are basically going to be dangerous to me in whatever aspect of my life. So that was an interesting start. Then my parents decided to get divorced. I was about 12, 13, and they split up in a pretty rough way, which actually led to more intensity and more challenging in my adolescent years and upbringing. So within all that, obviously, parents doing their best, trying to compensate somehow, give me the best that they could at the time, working also hard and allowing me to be able to have studies and upbringing, food on the table, and a nice place to live. So for that, I'm forever grateful. They did their very best. That was really, really an important thing. We can have feelings in our path and in our upbringing, yet an important thing is always to see the other side and honor that whatever happened, they were still attempting the best they could with the way that they could handle their own life situation and past trauma. So there I am, around 12 years old, parents divorce, complex situations, having to go and see my father once every other week, being with my mother, going back to public school, and there I'm thinking, oh well, that's pretty okay because I'm in public school in the same village that I'm living in, yet no, because the label was, oh, you come from a private school, so you're the rich boy. And there I go again, not finding my space, trying to figure out how I was and being in that space where asking nothing, asking for nothing, being thrown out as, in any case, you're different. And that was a whole challenge to have to go through, to overcome. So I become very rebel, very aggressive. I was kicking into doors, being expelled from classes, and maybe really being hard, being intense. The teachers must have had a hard time with some parts of me because I must have been highly challenging with all that I was going through in my life and not being able to express it, not have a space. Because when I was 13, we're talking about roughly 35, 40 years ago, well, therapy wasn't a common thing and finding that kind of help didn't really exist. So now there I am in that new school, being bullied again and being exposed to the same kind of situations. Intense moments, going through all that life, trying to find some friends, connecting with a few, feeling rejected by others, and again, lonely child, having to figure myself out. Going to the mountains to see some friends over the weekend, yet not the same friends. So I want to mingle, I have friends, but then again, they're not from the same place. So some kind of an expat, extraded, put out there where I was really having friends, and those are actually now my best friends, and my long-term friends are from up there in the mountains. Some are from the UK, others from Australia, others from South Africa, some from Switzerland, but all of us found ourselves there because a part of our upbringing was in that little village of Champery in Valais in Switzerland. So many of my friends actually in my roots, I would say, the biggest intense part or the place which I could call home the most was that little village of 700 people expanding in the winter season. So I go through my youth, my teenage, learning, expressing, going through the balance of the ups and downs, and then one of my family members, in an intense, desperate move, attempts to commit suicide by driving up the motorway the other way around, completely drunk. So I realized that aspect was really hard to live for a 14, 15-year-old. But I only noticed that just a few months ago. I hadn't taken into account all that important factor of it. And then, going along, a few years later, another member of my family has an accident. I'm around 17, 18. I have to go and collect her and my grandfather in prison, where they were basically there because they'd drunk too much and they had to basically sober up. So another impact where not really spoken about, not really released, and we don't talk about it. I mean, that's not something we talk about. It's a taboo. Everything's fine. And I realize all the impacts of the abuse, the impacts of these important, intense situations in my life, or what actually happened through to my parents, to the family somehow. And noticing that that doesn't belong to me, but yet I have a certain responsibility to myself to let go of that guilt, that shame, those questions I may have, or all that pain related to that, associated to that, and saying, hey, that's not okay, actually. That's just, it doesn't work. And how much pain and suffering must have there been on their side to actually have to act or be that way. So that their part doesn't belong to me. The only part which belongs to me is now how to overcome that. And I continue a little bit in life. I'm around 18. What happens? One of my teachers dies falling off a cliff when he's actually doing rock climbing. That's another event. I reach my 19 years old. My best friend ran over by a car when he's on a motorbike. 20, another friend finishes into the front of a truck, exposed again to death. 26, my father dies. He's 59. And having to overcome that part of dealing with grief, with death, and I'm exposed again to those parts of death. And how are we so exposed to death that that means that we need to change something in our lives, or we need to realize what's going on with all that part, with those intense moments, those things we need to overcome with. But no, we're not taught how to deal with it. I was just a young father at the time. My daughter was 3 years old. And then how do we deal with all these situations? How do we actually go and find help? And it's not something which made sense to me that at that moment. I didn't know how to react with that. So I put a tap on it, just put a big lid on all of it and do other things, just live your life again. And I'm living my life, different situations. Our daughter then come to Spain, open a dive school, move to go abroad and try and change life. And then I come back to Switzerland, basically after a divorce and my daughter being back in Switzerland, having to go through the grief of a business and of a relationship, and how to connect with basically the idea that I had of family or fatherhood, and having an impact also on my ex-wife with those situations. I'm not perfect at all, so I have my blame, my situations which I have to deal with within all that, and how to manage situations. And I find myself into a beautiful new relationship. We're together during 13 years, a recomposed family, 2 kids on one side, my daughter on the other side. She decides to come and live with us. We spend some time. Then complex moments, the ego comes back in, more situations, more intensity. We're trying to relive, to battle all these fears, all that trauma probably, which is hidden inside. And in 2019, the partner I'm with gets declared with, you name it, lung cancer. What happens? Less than a year after, she passes away. 2020, yet another death of someone the closest to me, the person I'm imagining that life together with. And I'm still going through the realms, but within that, I'd been already working on self-help, self-development, reading books, the law of attraction, energy healing, hypnosis, coaching, and all these parts of how to deal with our emotions. So I was already starting to go into that healing and energy work and pursuing all this path. So she passes away, and a year later the kids go, and I'm found there alone in this town and thinking, well, what am I doing here? I'm exposed to this. What should I do? And I find myself catching COVID. So I'm struck down, can't move at all. And at that time, basically crying in my bed, what do I do? I'm going to ask for help, but who do I ask? Well, my higher self. I ask for guidance somehow. Some would call it a prayer, some would call it calling our higher self or our guidance, our intuition. Basically, I was calling and I wanted to know. And I said, well, what do I have to learn from this situation? And at that moment, in the middle of the night, I woke up with, if you die tomorrow, where do you stand with your regrets? Which was basically another fuse, a kick in the butt, saying, hey, are you going to make a move now? And at that moment, I took that decision. I said, right, okay, let me take pictures of the flat that I'm renting, find someone to take over all the furniture, and go and live your life. My idea was, right, nothing's really holding me back now. My daughter's 21 years old. I asked her before, I said, that's the question, that's where I want to go. And she was like, well, do it, because I might not be staying here in Switzerland all my life. So don't block things for me, live your life. And which is what I did. So I left in my Dacia Duster. It was just a car, and I spent 18 months heading down to Fuerteventura in the Canary Islands, living in my car with 3 backpacks. I'd got rid of everything in my life, and I had so little: my camera, my computer, a few things, my clothes, some books, whatever I needed to cook my food, and I lived in that very, very minimalistic life. Leading to 1 year after, where my best friend, again, Noelia, dies in a plane crash. One of those small Cessna planes crashes in there. She's not 30. And me thinking, that's painful again. Why? Why is that happening? And it brings us back to the essence of movement. That's what I realized. It brings us back to that essence of live your life for what you want to do. You're not a tree. If you want to do something, do it, move. You can't fail at life. You can try things, go and experience, and say, right, that didn't work as I expected. Okay, do I want to pursue it? Where's my dream? Has my dream changed? Where am I standing in my life? 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, a week, a month? Are we still good? Are we still happy? How are things moving? And then I can continue again and have that thought on, now I'm in Fuerteventura and I found a little place in the desert here. And that thing of, am I still happy? Are things happening? And it's been 2 years now. And there's been good times and there's struggles. And in these struggles I'm thinking, am I still in the right place? I know that I'm doing the right thing, that I'm communicating and connecting in a specific way with all that intensity of going through that life. But now, is that correct for me? Is that still working in that connection to myself, learning my patterns, my traumas, maybe forms of dependency, or should I call it maybe some of my values of being in a community or connecting with people? And I went through a last relationship a little while back, and it was a beautiful relationship. That person, I hold her fondly in my heart. Simply we couldn't find a way to connect and to communicate. That was our Everest, and we didn't manage to overcome that. And I'd say that there's another grief to go through with that, saying, hey, that's also part of me. How was I not creating that safe space, and how that person wasn't actually maybe doing that work on herself and being hidden and held by our traumas. So how are we overcoming that? And then suddenly I realized, I'm like, yes, I'm in a wonderful place. There's the sea, there's 28 degrees, it's a wonderful weather, I love this warmth. And what I realized that I'm lacking is the connection. The deep, heartfelt connection to connecting with someone, to creating something. And I'm realizing that it's a part of something I need to give myself. The more I'm giving it to myself, the more I can actually connect with people who can see that part of me. Are we fighting to be seen? Are we fighting to be loved? At which moment am I just connecting to myself and giving myself what I would like from someone else? So I've been going through all these steps, all these parts of life, thinking, okay, I should do this, I should do that, according to others, according to other terms. And then I see all these deaths around me and all these griefs and all these things of being different. Simply being me. Going from a very analytical job as a computer programmer to now hypnotherapy, healing and holistic healing, where in a few weeks I'm going to do my shamanic drum, and I realize that everything I do goes into the essence of the subconscious and that I can't explain. And there's a part of me thinking, people will find you crazy. And another part thinking, well, that's what I love doing. Transmitting, sharing, activating people and showing them that yes, life is not over and that we can overcome all these things and then we can decide to plunge into the depths of our darkness, of our shadows. We can talk about them. That we don't need to be ashamed of what happened to us. that we don't need to be ashamed of even what we've done because we did our best at that moment. We need to just learn to forgive ourselves and to work with that part of us and seeing something new, something lighter ahead, saying, right, today I can be something different. So I decide to not be led by my triggers. I decide to not be led by my trauma. So I'm going to observe all that because I would like to make a move and a step forward. And you can too. So why am I telling you all this story in such an intimate way? It's to say that after I started figuring out my self-help, I started connecting to that depth of my shadows to go and take energy healing sessions, hypnosis healing sessions, energy healing activations, breath work, and really working onto all the shadow work, doing that conscious work of writing, journaling, observing myself. Why? Because I believe that I'm worthy. I'm worthy of that life, of that part where whether someone likes me or not, I can slowly detach. I can be very appreciative of it. Someone says, wow, I'm really, really happy that I met you. I can be very grateful for that. And if someone is incapable of expressing what they need towards me, well, I can say, okay, well, this is what I'd like, but I can't change you. So, maybe we let go. That's okay. And there's a deep part of us in that work of saying, how can we grow to be a better person? Sometimes we just realize that we want to become that better version of ourselves. So we're going to give ourselves the tools, the space, the energy to do that. And from there, we can create change, and everything around us is going to change. We're going to interact in a different way. We're going to find our worth, and you too can do that. And I really wish you for that. So just remember that whatever you're going through, whatever you've gone through in your life, this too shall pass. Yes, today it's hard, today it's painful, and at the same time you can be resilient. And remember that it takes you to take that difference, to take that decision, say, right, okay, how is that affecting me? I'm not alone, I can find help. I can go and find the right people, be drawn by my intuition, but we can make those moves, those steps, and we can grow into a different person in our lives. So whatever you're going through, maybe that path can help you. And even though you could find yourself in financial rut, in emotional situations where it's really hard, life is showing us ways of being empowered to find solutions, to suddenly also trust it and say, hey, something's there. So let's see the magic in the little things. We have time, we have the weather, we maybe have friends, we just being able to breathe and get up in the morning is a miracle. And some people, all these people who have passed away, would probably like to be in my space today, being able to talk in front of a camera. So let's also remember that. And it doesn't mean that we need to castigize ourselves, kind of castrate ourselves and say, no, but because of that we can't live a happy life. No, let's be super honoring and grateful for what we have, and we can make an improvement by seeing ourselves and by looking at that path. And within that we can actually give hope and magic and something very different to others who are going through hardships or hard times. So if you're going through hard times today, if you're going through hardships, simply know that you're not alone, and that some people around you have gone through a path and there's no level to that path. And that in that path you're learning a lot about yourself, and that's the biggest gift, because that gift you can transmit to others. You can hide the taboos, you can let them go, and you can actually surrender to the full beauty of who you are, and then start exploring a little more. When you explore your own shadows and you open them up, it allows people to actually open up themselves to what they've gone through, and maybe allow them to have some certain type of healing. So that's all for me today. Just wanted to share that part of the story. Hopefully it's inspiring to some, and remember to just share, like, subscribe, send this to someone who you feel might need it today, and don't hesitate to post a comment. That helps for the channels, or just give me a little word out, or just send me a direct message or an email if that actually was connecting to you. So wishing you a lovely day. take care of yourselves, and